Good morning, everybody. Thanks for coming in from the snow. It's great to see lots of familiar faces here. My name is Sam Brukhman. I'm the creative director at Metaversal. Metaversal is a holding company that has two main roles in the NFT and the Web3 ecosystem. One is to invest in iconic NFTs that we believe will stand the test of time, and the other side, which is the studio side, which produces creative content into NFT strategies from soup to nuts, marketing, solidity, and NFT strategy, and everything in between. My role as creative director is to vision and to lead the studio into unknown territory. And as an artist, I'm very, very excited to be able to present Metaletters to you today. Metaletters is a really exciting opportunity that we're very much looking forward to, and one that I want to illustrate to you through 3 case studies before we get into the details. To that end, I'm going to ask you a question, and that is, what do you and Taylor Swift have in common? They wouldn't shake their heads and question how much of this I deserve. This is a line from Taylor Swift's 2020 song, The Man, a hard critique of patriarchy, an unashamed spoof of the film Wolf of Wall Street, but also a scathing comeback at media proprietor, record executive, and investor Scott Samuel Scooter Braun. Swift signed her recording contract when she was 15 years old. And the deal gave Big Machine ownership over her master records. This means they owned her recordings and her revenue streams and how her music would be used. Taylor speaks out about her plea to own her work, saying, for years I asked, pleaded for a chance to own my work. Instead, I was given an opportunity to earn one back at a time, one for every new one I turned in. Taylor Swift's increase in popularity meant her music was becoming more and more valuable. And so when her masters were sold to the tune of between 300 million and 450, Taylor took to social media in a very transparent way and told her fans her story, sharing that the release was not approved by her. Some people defended her, others defended Scooter, and whether you were Team Taylor or Team Scooter, there was one thing that stood out quite clearly. And that was, despite all the murky details, the legalities and the feuding, what mattered was that Taylor created her music, but she did not own it. Taylor has since re-recorded 2 of the 6 of her albums, now owned by Shamrock. More than as a bid for money, they are a power move. It's a bid to own her own labors of love. I feel you, Taylor. I myself am in the music industry. My background is actually in classical choral music. So I'm a conductor. I conduct choirs and orchestras around the world, and I actually jumped into Web3 during the spring in March of 2020. As an artist in the music space myself, I feel for her. My background in music, specifically choral and classical, has for the longest time been considered an art for pleasure, not an art for revenue. Even when it is profitable, record labels and agencies and other people in between have a tendency to minimize the potential revenues that small nonprofits, like the one that I started in 2017 called Verdigris Ensemble, to 10s or 20s of percents. Now, let's think about this for a second. Imagine a choir comprised of 16 singers, and they record an album that costs somewhere to the tune of $30,000 to $50,000 over a 6-month period. And maybe it makes a little bit of money. Maybe it makes about $10,000. If that split is an 80-20 split, Verdigris Ensemble or a choral ensemble would get about $2,000. $2,000 would equal to about $165 per choir member. And that wouldn't happen in the first week. That would probably happen over a period of 6 months. And this hypothetical that I'm explaining to you right now is hanging its hat on the fact that an album is even produced, which is rarely the case, until Betty's Notebook. Betty's Notebook is the first programmable music on the blockchain. It was released through Async Art, and it was created by myself and a collection of 23 different artists. This piece of music, traditionally considered super avant-garde, super crazy out there. The story is about Amelia Earhart and the distress signals of Amelia Earhart as heard by a young Betty Clank in 1937. The piece is like 20 minutes of full crazy suspicion and mystery and all sorts of things. Sold at auction for $375,000 to Metapurse in March of 2020. More importantly, every one of the 23 artists associated with the album received a sizable percentage of primary and secondary. This was one of the few times in the history of my industry of classical and choral music that all involved artists, in the midst of a pandemic, received between 3 to 5 times their normal pay, all because they believed in risk and taking a stand in owning part of their work together. These were people that were not NFT native and still did it during the pandemic. What is the problem that we're facing? Well, the pandemic was a really dark time. It was a really dark time for me. All of my gigs as a conductor were canceled and vanished in a period of 24 hours. What you and I had in common during the pandemic is the fear and maybe the loneliness and maybe the isolation. And in these uncertain times, in dark, lonely spells, people sought comfort from things like Netflix, hello Tiger King, Among Us, I don't know if you guys play that game, but I play it all the time. Films, games, books, apps, music. What we collectively turned to was as a culture, was what we had available to us through creatives. So let me ask you another question. Do you recognize this person? It's okay if you say no, because I too didn't know her face until I started putting together this presentation. But do you recognize this? A dystopian mix of pastels, blood smears, and luminous pink. And I'm sure the greater majority of you know that this is Squid Game. Maybe you watched this in Korean, or with English subtitles, or with dubbed voices. Maybe you loved it, maybe you hated it, but the fact of the matter is you know it. Some of you bought into this visual and the way the colors came together. You might have even wondered, why pink? Why pastels? Well, Chai Kyung-sun, production design and art direction for Squid Game, would be the person who would know. You recognize and buy into her work and her vision, but you don't recognize or know her. As of January 2022, there were 4.95 billion internet users globally, some 62.5% of the world's population. This is an increase of 4% year on year, which equals to approximately 192 million people. As a global community, our online presence continues to trend upwards. We're all absorbing digital stimuli in unprecedented amounts. We're aware of this, but what we're not aware of is that oftentimes of the people who created the digital stimuli and who poured themselves into these projects. Ownership goes often to the wrong parties within the creative process, because Web 2 as a platform wasn't necessarily always built for artists and by artists. Web 2 is not necessarily always community oriented. There are surely facets, Reddit and several other platforms, for sure, but it's not built on the precedent of people collectively sharing experience and compassion and support in a transparent way. So, what is Metaversal doing about this? The truth is we can't wave a wand and fix the cascading problems that surround the ownership of creative output and IP. But we can, and I mean us as collectively a community of creators, we can try. The starving artist is not a new concept. In fact, it is a cliche. It's not new knowledge to us that sometimes or oftentimes artists, creatives, and thinkers don't get what they deserve for their creative contributions, whether that's financial compensation or attribution, et cetera, whatever the case may be. Well, what is a new concept is Web3. And Web3 currently is still at its inception. It has the opportunity to be an artist's platform for artists, by artists, and the biggest thing that needs to come with building this platform should be community. So, how do we kickstart this? What is the first step? I'm very proud to be able to share with you Metaletters. We've come up with a program called Metaletters, which is an open call to the creative community to submit letters that make up the word metaversal, that will ultimately be minted and auctioned every 24 hours, every day for the next 5 years. That's 1,818 letters. A portion of the profit goes directly back to the creator as royalties, so that's 30%. 10% goes to Metaversal to recoup costs, and 60% goes to Metaletters. Let's talk about this for a second. Step 1 in Metaletters. An artist comes and creates artwork for a letter. Step 2, that letter gets sold. Step 3, the person who purchases that letter gets certain benefits. Those benefits can be, number 1, to be part of a DAO, and we'll talk about the DAO in a minute. Number 2, to get access to a community, live and online events of like-minded individuals. And 3, the ability to shape the future of a more equitable Web3. So what do I mean by that? The DAO is specifically designed to be able to have the community come together to find more equitable ways to get new artists and new creatives known and brought awareness to. The idea is a shared goal of creators, creatives, and thinkers becoming a hive mind, using collective thought, knowledge, and experience to build a Web3 that they would want and that they themselves can explore in terms of the limits of their own creations and wherein they can have a say on the parameters that govern their creations. So, this is just a quick introduction. We've had a significant amount of people already apply. We have, I think, over 300 artists in the pipeline that have come forward, and artworks that look like this. The number 1 I really like. If any of you have an octopus hat, I will gladly take it and wear it forever. The center here is a T with some glitchy graphics, and we also have an A that is pretty animated here. But the point is that every letter is a reflection of the community and is completely different from the next. Metaletters gives creators the ability to have a voice in shaping the metaversal community. In turn, Metaversal becomes a reflection and embodiment of its community. Metaletters will give creatives and artists a platform. It'll educate creators on the space and how to monetize their work. It'll support creators both financially and through shared learnings. It'll provide a level of security to its members. It'll be a place to network and connect with other creators and open the doors for collaboration and paving new paths. This is a space to create the Web3, which is supported by Metaversal, but where the real value comes from the community. So, Metaletters is just the start of what will be an ever-evolving endeavor in creating a platform of ownership and community in the Web3 space. Metaletters will tell a story of current culture. It is the zeitgeist of our time, and your contribution will mark a very particular moment in that story. Because of the way that Web3 and blockchain is structured, a contribution to the project is as important and monumental as the purchase from the project. Both will be moments marked in history. And I just want to pause this also to mention that any creators that have submitted a letter will also get a creator pass that will grant them access to the same aspects as the actual purchaser. A purchase will grant you access to the DAO that we just talked about and future drops for Metaversal. Anything that we create or make or produce as NFTs within the various companies and verticals that we exist in will be made available to you first. Either way, what this means is that you will finally get a say in what it is that you own in a transparent way that is supported by a community of like-minded creatives and thinkers. So, there are lots of ways for you to get involved, and we'd love to hear from you. First thing is, I'd love join the space to have a say in what this will look like. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can reach out to us and tell us what your feedback is about this. We're all ears. Second thing is check out Metaletters. We're passionate about the community that is starting to invest themselves into this project. You can check it out on our website and find out more on our social media. You can share your experiences with us because we want to know if you lost ownership in something over something that you worked hard on or labored over. Reach out to us on social media. Talk with me after this. We're here to hear you out and learn from these past experiences. This is a new space where we're growing and we're learning and we're figuring out ways to prevent this from happening to people in Web3. Finally, come visit us in the makerspace on the 6th floor at the castle, where you can get actually a t-shirt of all of the artwork that you saw here today and get to know the artists behind it. So, that brings us back to the original question, which is, what do you and Taylor Swift have in common? You both were or are more than likely to at some point experience what artists have experienced in terms of their creativity. Or, if not you, then at least someone you love or someone you know. And now, all of you know me, so therefore, you know what this feels like. What Taylor didn't have was the right kind of support, education, the correct platforms, the security or a network, and it cost her her ownership. When she was 15 and signed that deal, she didn't yet have her community. This is the time to build a community of creators looking out for creators and thinkers alike. We're here to try and help foster that environment. We're not pretending that we can fix all the issues that will crop up around ownership in the Web3 space, but we're going to try. And we're leaning into the idea of community hard. We think community is the thing that differentiates us. We're here saying we don't know it all, but all together we know a lot more. We're not shaping Web3. We're hoping that you will, and we'll be there in the sidelines cheering on the young Taylor Swifts in all of you. Thank you.